The sirens weren't for her, but they found her anyway. Margaret Thompson froze halfway down her hallway, the faint red glow from a passing patrol car spilling through the blinds like a warning. The phone was still ringing on the kitchen counter, each tone carving into the quiet. 3 rings. 4. She answered on the 5th. Grandma? The voice was small, cracked, barely more than air. Emma. Her granddaughter never called at this hour. They said I hurt him, she whispered. Please come. They don't believe me. Margaret didn't ask who they were. She'd spent decades surrounded by them, men with pens, badges, titles, each one confident in their version of truth. Her coat was on before the call ended. The kettle still whistled as she locked the door behind her. Downtown, the precinct smelled of coffee and paperwork. Fluorescent light flattened every face. A young officer looked up when she entered, confusion giving way to awkward authority. Visiting hours are over, he started, and stopped when she met his eyes. Maggie Thompson, she said evenly. District Attorney's Office. Retired. His shoulders dropped like someone had pulled the plug on his confidence. He didn't need to check her ID, the name still carried weight. She walked past him before he could decide whether to stop her. Through the glass of the interview room, Emma sat with her hands folded, wrists red from cuffs that didn't belong on a 17-year-old. The bruise on her cheek was the kind that told a whole story. Maggie saw it once, in a courtroom photo of a woman who hadn't lived to testify. When Emma saw her, the composure cracked. She mouthed, "I didn't do it." Maggie leaned close to the officer at the door. "Uncuff her. Now." Now. The metal snapped open with a sound that cut through every word left unsaid. Maggie took her granddaughter's hand. It was trembling, but warm. "Tell me," she said quietly. "Everything. From the beginning." Outside, a man named Derek Collins waited with his lawyer, rehearsing charm. Inside, Maggie was already building her case, not for a courtroom, but for truth. The night had just begun, and it would not end clean. Emma's story came out in fragments, her voice catching on certain words like they cut on the way out. She'd been upstairs finishing a history paper when she heard her mother cry out. She ran down the stairs and found Derek shouting, his hand still raised, her mother pressed against the counter. Something in her snapped. She'd grabbed the nearest thing, a ceramic mug, and thrown it just to make him stop. It shattered. He turned on her, his face red and smiling in that way that never reached his eyes. Maggie listened, saying nothing. She'd learned long ago that silence made people tell you what mattered. Every detail Emma offered painted the same pattern Maggie had seen for years in court, fear disguised as a family problem, pain dismissed as misunderstanding. Down the hall, Derek was working the room like he always had. His lawyer whispered strategy while Derek leaned back, cool and sympathetic. He told the detective he loved the girl like his own, that she was troubled, that teenagers lash out. He even managed to look worried when he asked if she was all right. The performance was effortless. It was also familiar. When Maggie stepped into the hallway, Derek's expression flickered. He didn't expect her. He tried to smile, but she'd already seen the quick flash of contempt before it vanished behind charm. "Margaret," he said, drawing out her name. "I wish you hadn't been dragged into this." "You dragged me," she said. "When you put your hands on them." The detective looked between them, uncertain who to believe. That hesitation was enough to remind Maggie why she had quit in the first place. Justice, she thought, was only as steady as the person holding the pen. By dawn, statements were taken and paperwork filled out, but the truth was still thin. Emma was sent home under caution. Derek went home too, claiming he didn't want to press charges for the family's sake. It sounded generous until you looked at the smirk hiding behind the words. In the car, Emma stared out the window, silent. Maggie drove with one hand and reached for her granddaughter's trembling fingers with the other. "He won't stop," Emma whispered. Maggie's grip tightened. "Then neither will I." The house looked different in daylight, too quiet, too neat, as if order could erase what had happened. Rebecca sat at the kitchen table with her coffee untouched, her eyes swollen and distant. She didn't look up when Maggie walked in. The bruises on her wrist peeked from under her sleeve, faded but visible. "Emma's upstairs," Rebecca said softly. "She won't talk to me." Maggie studied her daughter for a moment. There was exhaustion there, but also shame, the kind that comes from years of pretending everything was fine. "He's going to come back," Maggie said. Rebecca flinched. "He said he just wants to talk." The front door rattled before either could answer. 3 sharp knocks. Too steady to be friendly. Maggie's pulse jumped. She moved to the window and saw Derek's car in the driveway, his frame leaning casually against the hood, phone in hand, like nothing had happened. She opened the door but didn't invite him in. "I came for my things," he said, eyes flicking past her toward the living room. "No trouble. You can wait outside," she said. "I'll bring them." He smirked. "Still running the show, huh? Thought retirement mellowed you." Behind her, Emma appeared on the stairs. Derek's gaze shifted, and for a moment, something raw and dangerous flashed through it. Maggie saw it, the control he thought he still had. She stepped between them. "Get off my property," she said. He leaned closer, voice low enough only she could hear. "You think a badge and a last name make you untouchable? You can't protect them forever." Maggie held her ground until he finally turned, walked to his car, and peeled away. The silence he left behind was almost worse than the noise. That night, a brick shattered the front window. The note wrapped around it was short: "You can't keep her from me." The police took the report, promised extra patrols, and left. Emma couldn't sleep. Rebecca sat in her room with the lights off, staring at the doorway. Maggie watched from the porch until dawn, the cold biting her fingers. When the sun broke through, she made a decision. This wasn't just a family problem anymore. If the law couldn't protect them, she would rebuild it piece by piece, the way she used to: case first, evidence next, justice last. Only this time, it was personal. Maggie spread folders across her dining table like a general mapping a battlefield. Every file, every scrap of paper mattered now: photos of bruises, text screenshots Emma had been too scared to show, and a list of women whose names had surfaced since she started asking questions. Derek's history was a network of silence. He'd moved towns, changed jobs, reinvented himself, and left a trail of apologies behind. Rebecca stood by the doorway, arms crossed, voice low. "You're poking a bear, Mom. He's dangerous." Maggie didn't look up. "He already proved that. He's watching us." "That's good," Maggie said, eyes sharp. "Means he's nervous." Rebecca's voice cracked. "And what if he's angry?" Maggie paused then, the fatigue settling into her shoulders. "He already is. But anger's predictable. Fear makes people sloppy." Outside, the streetlights buzzed against the night. A car idled across the road too long. Emma peeked through the curtain, breath shallow. "That's his," she whispered. Maggie walked to the window, calm but calculating. "Stay back," she said, memorizing the license plate. The car drove off, but the tension stayed. Maggie knew the pattern: escalation before control breaks. She'd seen it in case after case. She called an old friend in the department, asked quietly for surveillance, but the response was hesitant. Derek had friends everywhere. Complaints disappeared. Reports went missing. The machine was still protecting him. By morning, a small package arrived on the porch: no note, just a flash drive. Maggie played it on her laptop. Hidden camera footage. A hotel hallway. Derek arguing with a woman who flinched when he raised his hand. A clear view of his face, the violence undeniable. She exhaled slowly. "Where did you get this?" Emma shifted in her chair. "Jennifer. The woman who used to work with him. She said she couldn't stay quiet anymore." Maggie leaned back, eyes glistening but fierce. "Then we're not alone." For the first time in weeks, she saw a path forward. But it was narrow, and lined with danger. That night she sat in the dark, gunmetal sky pressing against the windows. Her reflection stared back, older, tired, but steady. She knew he would come. The question was when. And when he did, she wouldn't be calling the police. The storm came without warning, fast, mean, and loud. Rain slashed against the porch light, and the power flickered before giving out entirely. The house sank into darkness. Maggie was in the living room, hand on the edge of the table, waiting. She had left her phone recording, a single red light glowing on the counter. A crunch of gravel outside. Footsteps. Then the sound she'd been expecting, the door handle turning. "Emma," she whispered. "Upstairs. Now." Her granddaughter froze halfway to the stairs, eyes wide. Maggie nodded once, steady and sure. "Go." The door opened with a low groan. Derek stepped inside, soaked, his smile thin as wire. "You always were dramatic," he said, voice calm, almost teasing. "Didn't think you'd turn my family into a circus." Maggie stayed still, her tone colder than the rain. "You're trespassing." He laughed softly. "You've been making phone calls. Digging around. You think you're smarter than me?" "I don't need to be," she said. "I just need you to talk." He took another step forward, dripping onto the floorboards. "Talk? You mean confess?" "You already did." She turned the laptop toward him. The frozen image of the hotel hallway filled the screen, the raised hand, the terrified woman, the proof. Derek's expression faltered, just for a second. "You don't understand what you're starting," he said, voice rising. "You're ruining people's lives. I'm ending what you started." He moved fast then, closing the distance between them. For a heartbeat, she saw what Emma must have seen, the blur of fury before the hit. But Maggie didn't step back. She lifted the small pepper spray canister she'd kept behind her leg and sprayed. Derek stumbled, gasping, clawing at his eyes. Sirens wailed outside, closer, louder, drawn by the emergency alert Emma had triggered from upstairs. Maggie's knees shook, but she stood her ground as blue and red lights pulsed through the window. Derek reached the doorway, coughing, blinded. For a second, he looked almost small, broken by the same violence he'd lived by. Officers burst in, shouting commands. Maggie didn't speak. She just exhaled, the tremor finally leaving her hands. When they took him away, Emma ran into her arms, crying into her shoulder. "It's over," Maggie said quietly, though her voice trembled with everything that word had to carry. Morning came slow, as if the world needed time to steady itself. The rain had stopped, leaving the air washed and raw. Maggie sat on the porch steps with a mug that had gone cold, watching the sun catch on the wet leaves. The house was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. This one held space for breathing. Emma slept upstairs, finally without the twitch of nightmares. Rebecca had left earlier for her first counseling session, a decision that had taken more courage than anything Maggie could remember. It wasn't triumph that filled her, it was exhaustion, deep and clean. The police had taken Derek away that night. The recordings, the footage, the old reports Maggie had pieced together, everything had built a wall of truth too solid to bend. He'd tried to twist it one last time, claimed he'd been provoked, that Maggie had set him up. But the evidence spoke louder than any story he could invent. Maggie had been asked to testify. She'd said yes. Not for vengeance, but because silence was how this kind of rot survived. She'd seen it too many times, officers shaking their heads, neighbors pretending not to hear, families choosing peace over truth. She wouldn't let that pattern repeat. The porch door creaked, and Emma stepped out, blanket around her shoulders. Her eyes were tired, but there was something new in them, clarity. "You didn't sleep either," she said. Maggie smiled faintly. "Didn't need to." They sat in quiet for a long time, the kind that didn't ache anymore. Emma leaned her head against Maggie's shoulder. "You think it's really over?" "No," Maggie said softly. But it's different now. He doesn't get to write the story. A breeze moved through the yard, bending the tall grass. Across the street, a neighbor waved from her mailbox, one of the women who'd come forward after the news broke. Maggie lifted her hand in return. Change didn't come all at once, she thought. It came in whispers, in stories retold by those who finally dared to speak. Inside, the kettle began to whistle again, steady and familiar. Maggie didn't rush to turn it off. For the first time in a long while, she let it sing,